Welcome to the Borgen Podcast, the only English language podcast about fictional Danish politics. On our show, we explore the people, events, and parties that make up the fictional Danish parliament on Borgen. I'm one of your hosts, Amy, coming to you from Istanbul, Turkey. And I am, as always, joined by my good friend and co-host Chantal, who broadcasts from her room with a fabulous view in Toronto, Canada. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Chantal.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here with you on this sunny day in Toronto. It's November 19th in the morning.
It's the November 19th evening here. I bet it's a bit warmer here than it is where you are. I heard it snowed in Toronto.
It snowed and yes, it was beautiful, but then I had to shovel it. So
we had 15 degrees in sun for half the day and cloudy this morning. 15 degrees.
Sounds wonderful.
It's too hot in my apartment right now.
Sounds wonderful. All right. So we're happy to be back recording. We're going to be wrapping up the last couple of episodes of season 2 of the Borgen podcast. And with that, we're going to get straight into it. I'm going to be discussing episode 9 of season 2, and Amy's going to follow me and talk about episode 10. So If you're ready, Amy, here we go. So episode 9 opens up at TV1, and it's with Torben and Ulrich on air talking about Birgitte's opening speech and how she expressed her thoughts against the former government's privatization of healthcare, and she wants to have a public health system. Birgitte speaks out against, quote, giving tax advantages to those who prefer private hospitals. Torben comments that she is also saying that private hospitals contribute to the declining quality of public hospitals. The next scene is Parliament. Birgitte is looking for Kasper, who hobbles into her office late for work. He's got crutches to help him walk, and he has 2 canes. Well, those are the crutches. Birgitte is displeased with him, and she tells him that he was injured in a sports injury, and she tells him that, quote, you're cut out to sit behind a desk and use your head. She tells him this is ironic because they are trying to get a major healthcare reform passed. The next scene is Laura, Philip, and Birgitte in the therapist's office, and he said that in his assessment that Laura needs long-term therapy to change her negative thought patterns and removing her anxiety. The suggestion is for Laura to go into a 2-month therapy program. The therapist said that it is fairly expensive, but the private healthcare insurance covers 85%. We see Laura fidgeting with her hands, and suddenly she has an outburst, knocking things off of the therapist's desk to the ground. Birgitte calls Kasper and tells him to cancel the conference room that was planned for the conference this afternoon to happen. She asked him to handle it and for him to stop by her house later to brief her on the meeting. Philip takes a break and goes to see his girlfriend who works at the hospital. He asks her what she thinks of this situation in her professional opinion. She affirms him by saying that it is a good place that the therapist has recommended. He falls into her embrace, and it is clear that he is upset and feeling overwhelmed. At the press conference, a journalist is overheard gossiping, saying that, quote, it's how she gets access to the PM. He's putting 2 and 2 together that Kasper and Katrine are an item. Han tells Katrine that she'd better go public with the relationship and that Katrine may lose her job if Torben hears about this the wrong way. After the 2-minute press conference, it was quick as Kasper did not say anything on behalf of Birgitte, who's out at Laura's appointment. The press leaves, and when Katrine comes back to her room, he asks her to hand him his crutches. He was keeping it a secret from the journalist that he was using crutches, telling Katrine, quote, I'm not going to hand Express the headline, quote, Ministry on Crutches. And remember, of course, Express is the gossip tabloid that Michael Lagerson owns and runs. Katrine tells Kasper that them keeping the relationship a secret is going to boil over and they need to think about what to do. Kasper comes to the Nyborg home and reports to Birgitte about the press conference. Laura is also there. Kasper tells Birgitte that, quote, solidarity is going to make you pay for their vote for the health care reform. The phone rings and is Anne-Sophie Lindencrone, and Birgitte is heard asking her, quote, "What do we need to work out before you vote for our reform?" Kasper and Laura are alone now, and we could see that she looks listless and gives one-word answers at his attempt at pleasantries with her. He tells her that he had spent 13 months in a mental hospital and that no one understands. He smiles and asks her not to say anything. As he's leaving, Kasper tells Birgitte that he's dating Katrine and that they live together. She says nothing at first. He tells her, quote, she's not a reporter at home. Birgitte smiles and tells him congratulations. It is clear that this news is not a problem for her. Kasper heads to Katrine's apartment where he's also living and gives Katrine the good news that the PM does not have a problem with their relationship. He asks her what Torben has said, and she tells Kasper that she has not had the chance to talk to Torben yet because all anyone can talk about is Birgitte canceling the press conference. Kasper tells Katrine that Laura is suffering from serious panic attacks. Katrine says in a low voice to him that you shouldn't tell me. Kasper says, I know, but maybe I needed to tell you. When I was Laura's age, and then he stops. Katrine's face softens and she comes to embrace him and kiss him on the forehead and says, I love you. She understands that when he was Laura's age, he had a very difficult and tumultuous life. The next morning, Birgitte, Philip, and Laura head to Lee's home, which is the place where Laura is going to be staying, where the therapist suggested. The woman meets them there, and she's the head facilitator, it seems like head administrator and therapist. And she's not fazed that the PM is in her office, which I think is really great because this is a meeting not about Birgitte, it's about Laura. The woman says to Laura, I understand, Laura, you don't want to be here. Would you like to tell me how you feel, Laura? Laura begins to say, you won't understand. Birgitte tries to encourage that and says, sweetie, you don't know that. The therapist says, maybe we don't understand, but let me describe how I think you feel. You feel as though you are behind a glass wall, out of contact with your parents and your friends. You have trouble breathing, and when there are too many people around, you are afraid your heart will stop beating if you let go. You're exhausted in the morning and awake at night. You don't want to take your medicine because you feel it's weak of you and that it makes you feel like you're letting down your parents. I'm just guessing, and I am good at guessing because there are others who feel exactly like you do. I tried to help some of them here, and Laura agrees to give this a try. Over to TB1, we see Katrine go into Torben's office. He's busy, and she gets straight to the point and says, I am dating Kasper Yule, the PM's spin doctor. He freezes and looks up at her and asks her, have you gone mad? Are you aware of the possible consequences? You can't date her spin doctor. She says, he's living with me. Do you want me to clear my desk? Torben says to her that if I suspect any pillow talk between the two of you, you're out. He further goes on to ask her if she's planning for any babies soon. And if they're going to start trying, to let him know. Will you? Katrine has a look of obvious surprise on her face. Torben says, I need to know. I need to have enough people on duty. This makes paperwork less difficult. But congratulations. She does not say anything and looks at him and smiles and says, thanks. The next scene, we see Pia telling Katrine that we're going to have Ulrich do the 8:30 p.m. program and that we're giving her a story about secondhand smoke. It's crossed my mind that this is Torben's way of punishing Katrine for living with Kasper and possibly getting pregnant someday soon. The next scene is Anne-Sophie Lindencrone riding her bike beside Birgitte's car, and Birgitte tells the driver to stop. She rolls down the window, and Lindencrone asks her if she got her email. Birgitte says, yes. You want me to cut the tax advantage twice as fast as we agreed. Lindencrone says that, quote, it's as bad as in America. We never should have had those tax advantages. Birgitte says, still, families now budget for them, and we can't just cut them overnight. She suggests to phase them out gradually. Lindencrone asks her, Don't you want your health reform to go through? Birgitte asks her if this is a threat, and Lyndon Crone says, quote, we're not giving it away for free. We're not just parliamentary cheerleaders for all of your bills. So do you want to get your health reform passed? Birgitte says, quote, I've already met plenty of your demands. This one is too much. No, if you want to topple a PM, you've supported until now, then opt for Lars Hesselbo instead, okay? Next, we see Birgitte at Parliament, where she tells Kasper about her encounter with Lyndon Crone and that she's laid out more demands on Birgitte. Birgitte says to Kasper that she's closed the discussion, but that they need to write the bill in favor of their views. She tells Kasper that Laura is going to be staying at Lee's home and it's going to cost a fortune, and we need to figure out how to pay for it. It would be foolhardy to use Philip's private health insurance, seeing as our reform bill declares war on private health insurance. Birgitte says she does not want this to hit the media. She says to Kasper, seeing as our reform bill declares war on private health insurance. Kasper says that this is good scoop for the media. The PM's daughter staying at Lee's home. He says, it's the very thing that you oppose. Who stands to gain from it politically? The opposition. It's only it's not Hesselbo's style, unless he really wants to score political points on Laura's illness. Kasper tells her that he cannot guarantee Birgitte absolute protection from the media, and she says, you have to. And he says, yeah. Next, we see Birgitte being interviewed on TV saying, quote, I don't want to lose our fine public health system in favor of conditions like those in America. We see Torben and Ulrich talking on the camera at TV1. Torben clarifies that she wants to cut the tax advantages on private health insurance to avoid having taxpayers support private health insurance. The health reform is keeping in with the government's battle of values. At home, Magnus and Birgitte are having dinner together, and when she asks him how school was, he tells her that they talked about Laura at school and that she's gone to Lee's home to feel better. Birgitte questions him politely and gently and asks him if that's all he said, and he said yes. Magnus asks if Philip is going to sleep over, and Birgitte says that he does not live here anymore, so no, he's not going to sleep over. Katrine comes home to her apartment to find Kasper there working his computer. She tells Kasper that she's told Torben of the news of them being together and that he wants to know if they will have kids. Then they get into this really awkward conversation. Kasper's lukewarm and implied that they are not going to have kids because both of them work so much, and that is not a life for kids to be in with absent parents. She asks him who said they will always be working so much if they had kids. It's clear that they are not seeing eye to eye in this conversation, and they're thinking in different ways. She says to him, if we had a baby, maybe we wouldn't work so much. I'd like to imagine a future that you hadn't already mapped out. He responds by saying that he does not like answering hypothetical questions. It is obvious to the viewer, the audience, that this is a very tender subject for them. Laura and Birgitte are on the phone. It's morning time the next morning, and Birgitte is asking Laura how she is doing. She says that she's had breakfast, but she does not want to participate in a group therapy session to talk about herself in front of others. Instead, there are some exercise sessions which she'll participate in. Kasper hobbles over on crutches to Birgitte's house, and he hands her the morning paper. The headline says, quote, she wants to cut tax advantages of health insurance for common people, and yet the PM admits her daughter to an expensive private hospital. Kasper tells her that they'll put a lid on it, and it's just Lageson's personal vendetta. Hesselbo has not commented on it, and I honestly think he's above it. Birgitte thinks and remembers Magnus had told someone in his class about Laura. Magnus comes out onto the veranda where Birgitte and Kasper are and asks, I can't talk about Laura? And he has a confused look on his face. Next at TV1, Torben and his crew are standing around the computer and streaming a video of Lageson from the Express website. Lageson says, quote, hypocrisy is pretending to hold a certain belief, view, set of values, feeling, or standard in fact you don't. Brigitte Newborg wants to cut tax advantages because the evil private hospitals steal the best doctors. Yet she spends a fortune to have her own daughter sidestep the wait list. If that isn't hypocrisy, I don't know what is. Torben says that this has nothing to do with politics and that this is Newborg's daughter. Ulrich says, sure, it has to do with politics. Her health reform is about to be passed. Katrine says that she agrees with Torben, and Torben asks Simon to get a quote from Parliament and give it to Ulrich, who will run it on tonight's news. Katrine looks disappointed and goes to see Torben afterwards and asks him if he's taking her off the government stories in case she can't handle it, and says, maybe you're afraid I can't keep up with my work and my private life apart. Keep my work life and private life apart. He tells her that she's jumping to conclusions. Simon is over at Parliament interviewing Hesselbo and asks, quote, is it hypocritical of Newborg to send her daughter to a private hospital? Hesselbo responds, I won't comment on her private life, but I find it astonishing that she's out to stop common people from using private hospitals when she herself uses them. And I thought that this was at least, more polished than what Lagesson would come out and say. So Kasper shows up at Lee's home to talk to Birgitte. Birgitte sees Kasper, but needs to talk to Laura's doctor first, and prioritizes that over talking to Kasper. Kasper stays in the room with Laura and the other people who are there in the room, and he waits for her permission before he sits down at the table, and he's seated in front of her. He asks Laura how she's doing, and she asks him, how did you get well? He responds, who says that I did? He says, I started talking to people and realized that maybe I was not as crazy as I thought. Then Birgitte comes back after talking to the therapist and says that Laura does not have to join the group therapy and that the therapist will discuss alternatives to the group therapy with her. And later we see Laura does indeed go to the group therapy. And I suspect that this is because she was no doubt influenced by Kasper and their little talk that they just had prior to that. Kasper and Birgitte go outside and he tells her, if Hesselbo enters the debate, you have to respond. She asks him, what will she say if she responds? Your daughter is ill. You've had to admit her to a private hospital, but you still wish to strengthen the public healthcare system. Birgitte says, and I want to cut tax advantages of the private health insurance. We can't accept waiting lists up to 50 weeks. Kasper says exactly and tells her to get emotional. He says, just don't stick to the facts. You're a mother of a sick daughter too. You're a PM for part of your life, but a mother throughout your life. And she tells him that it's tacky and she does not want to say that and laughs. And she does not say it, and she does not play the emotional card, as so many people would expect her to do, to get emotional because she's a woman, but she does not do this. Birgitte goes on TV1 to be interviewed by Katrine. Katrine starts off by saying, still, you want to strengthen the public healthcare system, and yet you use a private hospital. Birgitte says, I can't split it up like that. My daughter is very ill. Many Danes are in the same situation as me. In the long wait lists, and the long wait lists force us to find an alternative. Katrine jumps in and says, you've been PM for 3 years. Why haven't you alleviated this situation? Birgitte responds by saying, but I have. Look at all the bills we've proposed, and you'll see we've tried to better the situation. It takes time to correct Hesselbo's long favoring private hospitals. We want a strong public health sector. Katrine then brings up that Lagesson called Birgitte a hypocrite. And what does she think of that? And Birgitte says, if I'm a hypocrite for wanting the best for my daughter, as well as a strong public health sector, then I'm a hypocrite. I'm sure voters agree that I take care of my child and oppose the state-funded privatization of the health sector. Katrine asks her, if politicians have a higher moral standard than the rest of us, Birgitte responds by saying, politicians should have a higher moral standard, and I think I do, but I am also morally obligated as a mother to do what's best for my daughter under the given circumstances. That's why I'm looking forward to our health reform, of which I'm proud. The next scene is Birgitte in her office, calling Anne-Sophie Lindencrone from the Solidarity Party, telling Lindencrone, you've heard me refer to the health situation in America And I was showing my appreciation for your support, but I want your yes before we vote on the reform. And Sophie is on board and will support them. And Birgitte says they'll pass the reform on Tuesday. The next scene is at Lee's home, where Laura is staying and the group therapy is playing a game outside. Suddenly, a photographer with a telescopic lens comes out of the bushes and starts snapping photos of Laura, saying loudly in front of everyone, "Nice place your mom found for you, don't you think?" Birgitte gets a call from Lee's home to inform her of what's happened. Kasper is going to confront Lagerson and tells him that trespassing is a sin and that basically he's a lowlife for doing this to Laura and purposely terrifying her and triggering a new anxiety attack when she is on the mend. And Lagerson admits by saying, and this is a scene where they're face to face, Lagerson admits it by saying, "We don't want to terrify anyone." Kasper tells him, "Run the photos and face the consequences." Lagerson says, all smug, "Should the courts find him guilty of breaking the law, he'll happily print them an apology on page 18, and then goes into his car and drives off. Birgitte comes home, brings Laura home, and they go to sleep. Philip is sitting at the edge of the bed, watching them, clearly heavy with concern and worry. The next scene, they're back at Lee's home, where the media is swarming the front entrance and pouncing on Kasper as he drives up. "Give us something. What's the hospital fee here? How long is she staying here?" Kasper holds up the front of the newspaper and flaps it in front of their face. Laura is on the cover. These are the pictures that were snapped yesterday. And he says, "I'd like for you to consider whether you'll find this decent press coverage." Birgitte and the head administrator of Lee's home speak, and the administrator tells Birgitte to try and make this subside. The parents of the other patients are trying to call in, but they're having to wait extra long periods because the phone is tied up with these reporters. She tells Birgitte that they don't have the resources to deal with this, and Birgitte says she understands. The headlines the next day are, quote, "The week's top story is still that the PM's mentally ill daughter Her daughter had a nervous breakdown during the peace talks. Has Newborn taken care of her child at all during these past 3 years?" Next, we see Kasper at Parliament in Brigitte's office. She's upset, and she says she despises the people behind this, that they're hurting a child, quote, "hurting a child. How the hell do they justify themselves having a job like this so low and disgraceful? They're all rats. They went through our garbage can yesterday morning and this morning." She's getting really upset and angry. She asks Kasper who benefits from it, who reads it, what do people get out of it? The next scene at TV1 with some stuff, we see some staff watching a video. It's Lagerson again on a video on his website, Express, and he's reading out the Lee's home menu and making a point that the PM's daughter is in luxury and most Danes are not, which I think is completely sick and disgusting to do, to use Birgitte's child as a weapon like this against Birgitte. Pia is disgusted by Lagerson. Yeah. Torben wants to have Lagerson. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I haven't interrupted you, but I agree. It's so disgusting. And the comment, "Has she even taken care of her daughter over the last 3 years?" is despicable. It's like, I'm going to have more to say on that when I talk about my episode, but it highlights this double standard that we'll be discussing. It's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Birgitte as a mother is a failure because her daughter's sick. Birgitte as a prime minister is a failure because she's a hypocrite or whatever. Like, it's just impossible to do the right thing for for people all the time. And, yes. And of course, tabloid press will nitpick every little thing that the person does.
But this is a low blow. I mean, to take
it's really bad.
Read it out loud is disgusting.
Yeah, so it is disgusting. It's like the most kind of it's like this. Well, at the time this came out, this season came out 10 years ago now. Mm-hmm. So like now it's that kind of journalism has become kind of standard. Like, that's how bad things have gotten. It's like the post-Trump world, whether you're in America or elsewhere, has just become like this like feeding frenzy for bottom feeding tabloid journalism. It's terrible.
It's terrible. Yeah. So P is disgusted by Lagesson, as are, I think, all of us. Torben wants to have Lagesson into the studio to talk about press ethics. Then the phone rings and it's Kasper calling Ulrich, not Katrine, which is good. Kasper is not calling Katrine, which is good. To say that the PM's office is going to make all relevant information about the case available to them at their disposal, and that Ulrich can come by the parliament. Kasper meets with Ulrich, and Ulrich is dressed up in a button-up shirt and slacks and a blazer, very professional. And Kasper says that we're going to give you everything. Birgitte wants to comment, but doesn't want to talk to Lagesson. We may be able to persuade Laura's therapist to give her take on it as well. The next scene at Lee's home, we see about 4 photographers walking on the Lee's home property with their cameras poised and ready. There's a reporter's voice being heard over this scene. Today, the government is going to present the health reform package. Newborg wants to focus more on the public health system. The scene switches to Laura inside Lee's home, laying down beside Birgitte, and Laura tells her that she took the ball today, which means that she spoke in front of the therapy session, the group therapy session, which means that she's having a positive breakthrough. Philip comes to call Birgitte to come with him because the head administrator wants to speak with them. The administrator tells them that since the media interest and their presence on the property is not waning, she's had a meeting with all of the nurses and the doctors, and the other patients' parents are deeply concerned and that it's affecting their children. Just alone today, Lee's home has been approached by 30 to 40 reporters asking them to find another place. And she's asking them to find another place. Birgitte asked for 24 hours grace period before they move Laura. At Parliament, Birgitte asks Kasper, tells Kasper, as long as I am PM, the press won't leave Laura alone. Not now that the case has gone from being private to a political issue. At TV1, they are reporting the news. The PM has got her reform package passed despite the turbulence surrounding her. A PM will always be a subject to extreme political pressure. Back at Parliament, Hans Christian Thorensen is here to see Birgitte. The scene changes, and we're at the press conference now for the most shocking scene of the episode. Birgitte takes the mic with Hans Christensen at her side. She looks directly into the press and begins with a smile. Hello, I am sorry I had to cancel the last conference. I am astonished to see just how many brutal press coverage of me and my private life has become. It is vital for my family to overcome these hardships and for the government to get peace to work. And so I implore you, the media, to respect my daughter's need to be left in peace and to get well. However, a PM can't avoid the attention of the press. This story has become one of public interest. This has led me to make the difficult but necessary decision to obtain leave as PM in order to focus on my family and daughter. The media breaks out into an uproar. Vice Prime Minister H.C. Thorensen will be taking over my official duties. How long will you be on leave? Asked one journalist. That depends on my daughter. Will you call an election? Asked another one. No, responds Birgitte. This is only about me, the PM, not Parliament. With that, the journalists all break out, asking questions at the same time, and Birgitte walks out to let Hans Christian Thorensen handle the questions. She goes to her office, puts on her coat, grabs her bag, heads to the elevator, and the scene ends with her looking straight into the camera from inside the elevator as the doors close. And that concludes the episode. So a lot has happened.
A lot happens in that episode. There's less in episode 10, even though it's the final episode of the season. It feels like there are fewer threads through that episode that I'll be talking about shortly. But yeah, high impact. So there's a few different interesting things that happen in episode 9. The thing with Birgitte stepping aside as prime minister, which is unprecedented. Well, maybe it's not unprecedented. I don't know if a PM has ever taken a leave of absence in Denmark, but for her, it's unprecedented. And then the emergence of the low-life tabloid press
Yeah.
hitting a real low. I mean, it's been kind of declining. We see like Logson's tactics getting slimier and slimier as the season goes on, and they kind of bottom out here. Which is, it must be such a fun character to play. I can't believe how much fun that must be to play a villain like that. But like it just highlights it's very parallel to reality. Like I said, like journalism standards have like decreased so much over the past
2016.
Yeah, and even before that, like since the advent of the 24-hour news cycle, or like all news channels like CNN have started, you just see the same repeated sound bites over and over and over again. Like investigative journalism doesn't happen in the same way that it used to happen before. Like there's no, people used to watch the news at night, like the 6 o'clock news or the 8 o'clock news. And that was how we got information about everything happening in the world in the pre-internet era. Right. And so ever since the internet started, with this advent of like constant news things happening over and over again, and there's a million sources where you can get your information from. And yeah, a lot of it's and like this is becoming a major issue in our day and age, the misinformation age.
Yeah.
I've heard this era described as the post-truth era, where now you can have like, insane people like, who's that idiot in America? Marjorie, whatever, double name, blonde woman.
I don't know.
The one who made the comment
American
about
politics. And by the way, listeners, we are not American. I think some people mistake that we are American.
Yeah, we are not.
Both
We're
Canadian nationals. I live in Toronto, Canada. Amy used to live here. She now lives in Istanbul. We are not American. So I tried to stay away from American politics, even though it is all over our faces.
What is it? Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think her name is. She actually has said like horrendously anti-Semitic remarks, like that there's Jewish space lasers that are going to shoot Santa Claus out of the sky. That's a quote from her. Like people say this stuff, they go and like actually say these kinds of things. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it's like that's a thing. And it's just become so terrible. And when you look in Katrine's apartment, God knows how she lives in that tiny apartment with Kasper in there, especially with him on crutches. But anyway,
yeah.
when you see Katrine's apartment, you see there's a poster. Maybe I've mentioned this before. There's a poster on her closet door.
In season 1, when we did one of my favorite episodes that we recorded in season 1. It was the bonus episode called Interiors.
Yes.
And I love that episode because I think we did a really good job of it. If I say that. And I also like the way we dissected everything, like the scenes in the interiors. And you did talk about the poster.
All the President's Men.
Yeah.
Right. Which is this film made with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman as the guys who, Woodward and Bernstein, the guys who broke the Watergate scandal. Did anyone ever ask Nixon how he managed his family life and politics? I bet they didn't.
Probably not. I'm guessing not.
But it just that poster like harkens back to a type of journalistic standard and investigative power that you don't see very much. You do see it in other places, but not necessarily in quote unquote mainstream media. Sometimes like essayists will do better investigative stories. Like, I mean, this will also reveal probably my personal politics, as if you can't tell, I'm not conservative in any way, shape, or form. But like people like Rebecca Solnit or Rowan Farrow will do investigative journalism that will help expose, problems in our society. Like Rowan Farrow wrote an article in addition to two female journalists whose names escape me right now, even though I was looking at their stuff today, who helped expose the Harvey Weinstein thing. And expose his sexual harassment. And I believe a film has just been made about those two journalists. Let me quickly look it up.
Yes, it has. I saw it advertised in preview.
Yeah.
I went to the movies not that long ago.
It's called She Said. And let me just have a quick look at the names of the journalists. Oh, yeah. Megan Towie and Jodi Cantor, who broke one of the most important stories about this, ongoing sexual harassment problem in Hollywood. Not just with Weinstein. Obviously, Weinstein was like the key figure, but it's pretty widespread from what I understand. So and they were actually wrote for the New York Times. So that is a sort of mainstream journalistic paper, but more and more often it's like news has been reduced to like, the running script on the bottom of the screen and Twitter.
Yes,
which is and that's going to take another turn because of what just happened with Elon Musk buying Twitter. So who knows what's going to happen at Twitter anymore?
Yes, and it all comes down to, no matter what is happening, no matter what decade we're in, the viewer has to check their sources, check the date it was published, check who published it, and not just believe some silly, tweet from some no-name person. That's never going to change, no matter if it's 25 years from now or whatever. If you still have to check your sources and have that responsibility.
Mind you, also though, agencies, Twitter's not an agency. Media outlets like Twitter also can provide somewhat democratic news, or they used to. I don't know what will happen now, but somewhat democratic news sources in places where there's crises and where the standard media outlets are censored, like where I live, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bombing here a week ago tomorrow, and after it's a terrorist bomb, probably a terrorist bomb in one of the main pedestrian streets in Istanbul and Taksim called Istiklal Caddesi. And I used to live in that neighborhood. And immediately after that happened, there was a media ban on reporting on that event. And the press is very strictly controlled by the government here. So a good place to look also, if you're finding sources from different countries or whatever about a certain story, have a look at the Press Freedom Index so you can find out what kind of journalistic ethics the country that you're reading news from has, because that will have an impact on the type of news you're getting as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I point that out to my students, especially my Model UN students. The Press Freedom Index is a big indicator of like democratic process in a country as well. And that can make a big difference. Denmark has a very high rating, by the way. They have really excellent press freedom, which also includes a rating about responsibility of the media to report truthfully and factually, in addition to like freedom of the press. Basically, there's rights and responsibilities in equal measure.
All right.
And that's my rant about the media.
So bringing it back to Borgen, I've prepared some discussion points to discuss with you, Amy. So I'm going to lead that now. And
now that I took it off the rails.
I'll bring you back to
sure.
to Borgen. Okay, so viewing this episode as a Canadian, I have to say, of course, you as well, you're Canadian national, are in favor of this public health system, which is what we have here. This fantastic system where if I'm not feeling well, I need to go to the doctor, I don't need to pay. I have insurance. I can stay in the hospital. I have insurance. Like it is amazing. And that is something that I'm very grateful for in this country, which everyone will need at some point. And we have that here. So I really connected to her argument and her fight for trying to get that there. And to get away from this elitist system, because if you go private, then it is elitist, right? How much can you pay? What's your income? What can you afford? Is directly proportionate to the care that you're going to receive, right?
There is in Turkey, there is a strong public health system, and there's also private health insurance. So a lot of employers will offer you private health insurance as well. And I have used both the public and private health care here. And I have to say, I find them equally good. The difference is if you have private health insurance provided by an employer, I don't pay for that myself. The benefit is there's less waiting times, but the quality of care in both types of institutions is equally good. And I very often go to a public hospital actually for certain things. So, but I did, the benefit of my health insurance is I was able to get an MRI on my hip injury. I have a bone bruise on my hip, people. And I got an MRI same day. I went into the orthopedic guy's office, and he was like, yeah, I think you have a bone bruise. Let's get you an MRI. And I went downstairs and got one.
Great.
And I had like no waiting time. There was like nobody down there. So it was really lucky. And I did have to pay a little bit out of pocket, but I think it cost me, it did not cost me very much, like under $100.
Great.
Well under, yeah. And so
that's really awesome to hear.
Yeah, if I was getting an MRI in the public system here, I probably would have had to wait longer, but it would still be possible. And it would depend. They could send me to a hospital on the other side of the city if
Right.
like an MRI room was open or whatever. There's lots of hospitals here.
Right.
So
okay,
yeah.
So the second point I want to make, and I know we have to record your part too, so maybe we could just go through these kind of rapid fire.
Yes, sorry.
What I really liked here is Kasper and Laura having this time together, and they meet one-on-one quite accidentally, but it happens at least twice in this episode. And what I really liked about this is that he is the perfect person for Laura to talk to, because he's almost like a de facto family member. He's Birgitte's right-hand man. Yeah. He's very present in her life. He's someone that her mother trusts. He's much older than her, almost like a brother figure, older brother figure. And he's gone through this, and he understands difficulties, confusions, anxiety, loneliness, and feeling like an outsider at a young age, just like she is. So I thought it was really impactful for them to have this time together. And Birgitte doesn't know the content of their conversation, and she doesn't need to know. It was a very positive influence on.
In fact, Laura never mentions it. As far as we know, that stays private between her and Kasper. And I thought it was excellent as well. That's great,
because she understands the code. You know, when someone's gone through something very difficult, you don't want to out that news. It's something very sensitive, and she has the emotional maturity to recognize that.
Yeah, of course, because she has to now. Going through a mental health crisis gives you emotional maturity. It's part of the side effects of, I mean, if you manage to get proper care, if you have like the kind of anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder that Laura has, and you get proper care and attention, you do end up gaining emotional maturity, because you have to in order to deal with it.
Yeah, you have to.
And I love when Kasper just goes, yeah, they don't understand. They're not going to understand. And he's right. People don't understand who haven't gone through it. They just don't.
They don't. And I think it also gives her permission to feel.
Yes.
To not be afraid to feel, because, okay, they don't understand. So might as well just break the seal, let it all bust out how you're feeling, because they're not going to understand. So don't keep this pent up. Just accept it. Talk to Kasper, who has gone through it and has clearly survived. He's successful, right? Her mother really values him, and he's a positive influence. So I really like that. The second thing I want to talk about and point out was about Kasper and Katrine. And for the listeners that may not be aware, 2 episodes ago, we recorded a bonus episode all about Kasper, focusing on him and his life. And we also focused on his relationship with Katrine. And one of the things that I liked in this episode 9, is that their relationship ebbs and flows, but we see their love for each other and how she really understands him. So when he started talking about, Laura had a panic attack, she was immediately able to sense that this was a sore spot for him, and was there to, comfort him and let him know that she's a safe person to be with and talk to about it if he wants to. So I really like that in the relationship.
Same here.
Yeah, I think it's so important, right? I mean, that was something in Kasper's life that he was carrying with him for so long. And even into adulthood, we see that it's had significant imprints on him. And the reason why he didn't tell Katrine for so long, because he didn't know how she would react. And that's one of the things we really always respect in Katrine, is what a receptive and loving girlfriend she is. So
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And
lucky.
Yeah. And that's also why, I mean, it's that is also why he's able to help Laura when the time comes, when he has those encounters with her.
Yes.
He's able to actually, because it's out there, because now that knowledge is like, it's out there and Laura knows about it. So she's able to like ask him, how did you get better? And he's like, who says I did? Which I think is really interesting and worth pointing out, that that's also something that can happen when you have a mental health crisis. You don't necessarily get better. You just learn how to live with it, or learn ways to cope with your struggles. Or when you go through periods where you feel less well, you learn how to deal with it.
Yep.
And that's
reach
something
out.
that, yeah, I thought that was pretty good for TV land discussion of mental health issues, actually.
Mhm. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. So the next point I wanted to make, the scene that I thought was also kind of dramatic, was when Katrine went to talk to Torben to say, you know what, I'm in a relationship with Kasper Yule. And Torben's attitude towards, well, if you're going to start to have a baby or try for a baby, let me know. And
It's so inappropriate.
so inappropriate. And actually, it's illegal here. You can't ask.
Yeah, it's totally, yeah, you can't. It's probably illegal in Denmark too.
Probably.
I can't
Probably.
imagine that it wouldn't be. I would be surprised if it wasn't, but it's like, you can't say that to people. I mean, but Torben, I mean, he kind of crosses some lines anyway, right? So,
Well,
but that
yes,
kind
and
of thing.
It's so gendered. It's so inappropriate. You know, as we say, would they ask a man, do you plan to have kids? Do you plan to take
Yeah.
parental leave? You know,
Yeah.
and I'll go into just a little story for a minute here, just to say that I have a colleague who, she said that when she went to interview in jobs, that she would actually take her wedding ring off because she didn't want the employer. This is back pre-COVID, when we had in-person job interviews.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I've changed jobs in the pandemic and it has not been an in-person interview. It's been on Zoom, but this was pre-COVID, when you'd meet your, you know, go to interview, and she said she would take her ring off. And I'm not married, but I said to her, I said, I agree with you. And if I was married and wore a wedding ring, I would remove my wedding ring as well.
Yeah.
Because my marital status, if I'm married, divorced, separated, widowed, single, I have 2 husbands, 3 wives.
I think that's illegal too.
I think that's illegal too, but it's none of the employer's business. What I need you to assess me on is my ability to take this job, and
Yeah.
Am I complimentary to what you're looking for as a professional, yes or no? So I think it's sad, sort of the double standard of, you know, they asked a question of a woman.
Totally. And that's a key theme.
Presumption that all women want children, which all women do not want children.
Yeah, I'm relatively hetero, and like, I do not want kids. I have 140 of them in school. I don't need them in my house. Like, seriously.
I mean, I
don't want
would hate
kids
to be judged if I was married and I showed up in the job and someone looked at me and thought I'm of childbearing age. Would that be held against me?
I know. And, you know,
would I lose an opportunity
Yeah.
to an older woman who might not be in her childbearing, you know?
No, because of ageism. That's even worse. They'd be like, no, we don't need any old hags in here.
God.
You have gray hair, you're out.
Oh, gray hair if you're out. Yeah, well,
yeah.
We know that story here in Canada with one of our top journalists in the country being let go. The thought is it because she let her hair go gray in the pandemic? You know, and she is my favorite journalist of all time, and I will support her wherever she goes. The news is not the same without her voice. And that was a big thread here. You know, is it because she let her hair go gray?
Say her name.
Lisa Laflamme.
Yes.
My absolute favorite, most trusted voice in this country, most esteemed journalist. And there is no voice that I listen to and I believe is the voice of integrity and authority. So it's devastating that she's not reporting.
That was quite a scandal.
Quite a scandal. And so much happened after that. But anyways, this is not about that. Let me get back to my points here. So just talking about that double standard there. And let's see, what else do I have to talk about? Oh, Magnus's innocence of not wanting to talk about, can I not talk about Laura? And presumably that's how this story gets leaked out, right? Because some kid in the class probably went home and told their parents. Let me see. And okay, so let's bring it back to Torben for a second. I think this is going to conclude my my points. I may have a couple more quick ones, which I'll try and go through quickly. So where I do think Torben is right, okay, and we know Torben's a dick, but I do like him.
He's got dickish tendencies, but he can overcome them if he tries.
I think he's a dick, but anyways, I do like him. Would I be able to work for him? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I would go a full Hannah Holm on him, though.
I would go Hannah Holm, yes. I would actually prefer to work for Hannah Holm and have Torben to the side. I don't need to work under Torben. But anyways, where I do think Torben is right is when he is apprehensive about this news, when Katrine says she's dating Kasper Yule.
Yeah, it's a bit of a professional ethics question.
It is a conflict. And though Kasper Yule is not employed by TV1, they work so closely together.
Yeah.
Kasper Yule is the key connection to get all the stories from Parliament, to which TV1's ratings and standards and broadcast heavily depend on. So I do agree with Torben that he should be apprehensive and worried.
Yeah.
And when he tells her one screw up and you're out or something like that in his Torben way, I don't disagree with him.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that Birgitte, our PM, didn't have more to say about that when Kasper told her, but I guess she trusts him more, maybe, which seems okay. It sort of works anyway. I think the two of them together professionally can handle it, but
I think they can handle it too.
There's a question mark there.
But I also think Birgitte is more relaxed than Torben is.
Yeah, Torben is not relaxed about anything.
Torben is not relaxed at all. And Birgitte knows, like Kasper has proven himself over and over and over again. He can handle it. He is a smooth operator. We know that. So that is my comment about that. And let me just go down here. So I just want to comment about how this private and public thing and how Birgitte finds herself. And again, why Amy and I love Borgen, but I think all of the people who follow Borgen, love Borgen, perhaps listen to this podcast, why we love the show so much is that it has a brilliant way of making highly ethical matters collide with each other. And so have this situation here where her daughter needs to go to private care. And I do want to comment on privilege and say, yes, Birgitte is privileged. Of course. She will always survive. And it's just like in this pandemic. I mean, people with quote unquote higher jobs who could work from home, who could afford to have, proper PPE. Yes, we will survive. Is that something we should apologize for? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a question in education too, because not all kids have access to internet and computers at home. That's right. So it hits everyone, right? Yeah. Yeah. It was an issue actually, especially in public. Of course, public-private, as an international teacher, I'm not teaching in the public system in Turkey because the public system doesn't hire foreign teachers. Quite rightly, actually. Right. I'm working for a private school that's a not-profit private school, actually. But, our student body didn't suffer the effects of not having access to the equipment and, internet that they needed. Yeah, the resources that they needed. Yeah. But it was definitely an issue with other students. And it was hard enough online anyway, but without having internet, it would be really hard to continue your education. You'd have to have you'd either have to be an extremely disciplined high school student, because elementary school students probably couldn't self-direct. I'm sure they couldn't. The third grader couldn't teach themselves. No. Or you'd have to have someone at home who was teaching you. And exactly. How are you going to do that when I was going to say that. Very diligent parents to keep up with books and whatever. And the last point I'm going to make before I hand it over to you is, again, public versus private. And though Birgitte has the money to be in the private system, they actually don't give her any privileges in that. In fact, they ask her to leave.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is like, yes, you got into the private system, but they're treating you like a public person. Your money
Yeah.
can't
That's
buy their,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, your money can't buy everything. And they asked her to leave. And were they right in asking her to leave?
Yes.
Yes, they were right in asking her to leave. You cannot come in here and disrupt this whole hospital or this whole like
Yeah.
residence. We are
Yeah.
accountable to all these other
All
residents,
the other patients. Yeah.
you know?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
anyways, do you have anything else to say about that episode, Amy? I know we talked a
Um, just that I think the double standard theme is evident very strongly in episode 10, which is what I'm going to talk about now.
Okay,
So
well,
let's get into it.
get into it.
Last episode of season 2, and as with the episode, I think it was episode 8 that I did on the courtroom crisis, I divided up my notes into kind of sections. So I'm going section by section. So the episode opens, I start with government, and the episode opens with Hans Christian Thornson acting PM, going over business in a meeting, how to deal with the UN Security Council. Denmark's been a member of the Security Council, but wasn't in 2011. I checked. But there's, in case for people who don't know, this is just an aside because I'm a politics nerd a bit. The Security Council has 5 permanent members: USA, Russia, China, France, and Britain, I think. And then there's a rotating group of other countries who are on that. Greenland and mineral rights, and the press wants to run a story on who is the PM because our current prime minister has taken this leave of absence. So Thornton wants to meet with TV1 to discuss that question, not in his ministerial role as foreign minister, but as acting PM, to discuss all of those issues, actually. And Kasper and the permanent secretary think that this is a mistake. So Kasper meets with Birgitte at home and tells her that Thornton is jumping onto her stuff, her like pet kind of projects like Greenland, which he normally isn't interested in. But Kasper tells Birgitte her poll numbers are falling and they can't control the narrative of her leave anymore. He tells her that Thornson's going on TV as prime minister, and she insists her absence remain ongoing for Laura's sake. She's like, it doesn't matter. Let it happen. I'm here for Laura, and that's that. So she then sees on TV1 that there is a lot of debate about the impact of her absence. Torben and Ulrich discuss how it gives Labour a bit of visibility of an advantage because of the psychological effect on the public of being de facto leaderless. So the person they elected to be leader isn't there. Switching to Birgitte at home, we see her with Laura at the hospital. Laura seems to be doing a lot better. Her doctor recommends her going off slowly her antidepressants, phasing them out. And both Philip and Birgitte are there for the news, which is very good, of course. Laura talks with Birgitte in the next scene about her therapy and how she talks about worrying she will let her mother down because of not doing well in school. And Birgitte says, I don't care about that. You can't let me down, which I think is great. And obviously supportive. And obviously, I think from Brigitte's character's point of view, I think that's absolutely true. I don't think it would be a problem. Laura says, don't worry, it's only therapy. We talk about everything. It's good that Laura is shown as kind of accepting therapy as very normal. It should be normal. In fact, speaking of public healthcare, I wish mental health care was part of standard healthcare. I wish dentistry was as well too. I think all of that should just be standard.
Absolutely.
But that's my opinion. Because healthcare is healthcare. You might not always need it, but I don't always need to get my broken leg fixed either, but I can do it if I need to.
Yeah.
So Laura continues her recovery and is told that she can be a day patient. This is as the episode goes on. I'm just highlighting some parts about her in this section. Laura continues her recovery, is told she can be a day patient and won't have to stay over at the hospital. And all of this is leading up to what will Birgitte do now. As they are getting ready to take Laura home, Birgitte has a quick chat with the doctor there and reveals that Laura has said she feels guilty for not doing well at school and everything, and that affected Birgitte, actually. The doctor sympathizes and says that's the way it goes. Parents are bound to make mistakes in parenting. And Birgitte says sometimes she feels better just working and not dealing with her family, to which the doctor responds, join the club. I think all workaholics feel that way. And then she tells Birgitte that Laura didn't become ill because of her mother's role as PM. And I thought that was really important as well, because Laura could have had an anxiety attack with both parents at home doing everything they had normally been doing anyway. We don't know that either her parents' divorce or Birgitte's role as PM is the cause of this anxiety. It might have exacerbated it, but there's no way of actually knowing. There's no way of actually knowing. So that's what I think about that. And then I wonder if, everything that Birgitte did for Laura was the best thing she could do in the moment, barring, extraordinary behavior. Like as a parent, barring extraordinary behavior like abuse, like what Kasper experienced, is not doing the thing you feel is the best at the moment, the best you can do. No one is perfect. Hard times will befall all of us. And there's certainly no guidebook on how to make decent kids or how to make the best possible decisions all the time in a family. I mean, there's loads of self-help books about it, but none of them are definitive. You can't say this is the way to raise a good kid. You can't. It's impossible.
Right.
And, as the older I get, the more I realize that, adults knowing how to do stuff is kind of a racket. Like, we don't know how to do anything. We have to, and you raise one kid, your second kid is completely different. Ask my parents. They'll be like, oh my God, so my brother was not like me, and he was the easy one. But anyway, you do what you can. You make the best possible decisions that you can for your kids at that moment. And that's all anyone can do. Laura is definitely getting better. Later, we see her turn down her mom's invite for dinner to go hang out with one of the other girls, which is good. She's making friends. And then Kasper and Laura share another moment. He tells her, after she offers to help him deal with her mother and the whole issue with what's happening in the PM's office, he goes to her, life is a crock of shit. And she says, only if you let your anxiety rule you. And she tells him it's the shit that makes you stronger. And then she kind of gives him a hug and a kiss on the cheek, which I thought was really, really cute. And also I thought that was really good because the anxiety is getting to Kasper about what to do with Birgitte in this role and like how to control the press and everything. And this 14-year-old kid reminds him, it's only shit if you let it be shit. Which is kind of a good message for all of us, actually.
Yes, it is. No matter our age.
Yeah. Very wise, the things we know when we're teenagers. Must be nice. So then in the media, okay, back to the media here, as Thorsten's being asked about the government's most prestigious project, the Reform Bill, Our Common Future, he confirms the last part of the package is passing with a narrow majority because opposition won't cooperate. He says this is because the opposition feels there's an election coming. He insists there is not, and that it is not related to Birgitte's absence. TV1 continues discussing the PM's absence. Will she ever return? Torben and Ulrich on TV speculate there's no one suitable in the moderates to do the job. So therefore, it may be up to another party, implying that Birgitte's tenure could be over as the PM. And her parties as well. They suggest Thorsten doesn't have the clout to beat Hesselbo as a leader. They discuss a precedent where a previous prime minister had resigned after stating he had an extraordinary remark to make. As the viewer sees Birgitte preparing for work and going to the office, she wants to get back to it, passing the rest of the reform package ASAP before the holiday. And when she goes back to the office and rejoins everyone, she sees Pernille there, who suggests that behind Birgitte's back that they worked their butts off while she was away, and it was like she was barely gone. So there's always that kind of tension within the party, so it's good to see that that's back. And then they act very friendly to each other when they actually speak. And then in the other side of the media, so we have TV1, which is like the legit media, and then we have Lageson's Express, which is like the shitty tabloid media. And Lageson, and this is what I wrote in my notes, online in his shitty excuse for a paper, says, we often say that women lend the air of humanity to the corporate world. Women are more in touch with their feelings, but the prime minister must be able to cope with an extreme workload. Do we really want a PM who goes on leave for a month just to take care of her sick daughter? This from the same guy who in the previous episode says, has she even been taking care of her daughter if her daughter got sick while she was prime minister? And making fun of them for sending Laura to this private institution, which is ridiculous, but also, and very ironic considering he calls Birgitte a hypocrite. It's like, well, yeah, buddy, dude, check your definition again there, because he's also a hypocrite. So anyway, of course, he wouldn't have accused her of being a bad mother, if she hadn't gone and taken care of her daughter. He would have accused her of being a terrible mother, and because she does, she's a terrible PM. So it doesn't matter either way. You cannot be right. But I've never seen in any interview with any world leader ever, and I've listened to a few really long interviews with world leaders at different times, no one ever asks them how they coped with family life and being the president or prime minister or whatever. I've never heard anyone say to Justin Trudeau, for example, so how do you handle fatherhood while being the prime minister of Canada? Nobody's ever asked him that.
Or was it a difficult decision for you to take a break from fatherhood and have this career? Do you feel guilty for leaving fatherhood and becoming a prime minister?
Yeah, like, I don't even think most men would probably not even occur to men who
it would never
to
occur to them
to even think that was an issue.
No, they would think of it. That's their right.
Yeah,
that's their
exactly.
right.
It's
kids with the woman and go on and do whatever.
Yeah, and if you are in any way religiously conservative, it's the natural order of things, isn't it? That's what's supposed to happen.
Yes, and before we get listeners writing into us upset and angry, we are not saying it's all men. We are saying
hashtag not all men. Okay,
hashtag not all men. Okay, continue, Amy.
There's my Hannah Hole moment. Yeah. I've never heard anyone say to a male leader, like, how's fatherhood versus leadership? So Torben is insisting that the angle that they want to run is, can the nation afford to have any PM who has a home life and family and takes vacations and stuff? He wants to give the prime minister a chance to defend herself, to do a one-on-one with Katrine and talk about that issue. So he's trying to spin it so that it's not actually the gender role thing, but it's totally the gender role thing.
But he's Kasper doing it goes in a nice way.
Yeah, but it's still the gender role
polished
thing.
way, right? But we know the and what made him ask this in the first place. Of course, it's gendered, but he's not being a dick. Hashtag Torben.
This time. Hashtag Torben's not being a dick in this episode right here. He's one later in the episode, but we'll get there. So Kasper goes to the hospital to discuss the strategy and the interview with Katrine, and Birgitte says, are they flogging that horse too? i.e. the gender role discussion, and doesn't want to do it because she feels it's beneath her. He tells her Hesselbo could win an election today, that Lagesson is asking if women get off work easier and everything. And she counters with the fact that Parliament wants her as PM, and she says she should defend herself, but she refuses, and so TV1 gets Hesselbo in the end anyway. And then we focus back again on the family. So Birgitte and Philip finally start to have a conversation about their split in this episode, and the fact that she thinks he was too quick to move on. He says, you weren't there, you were working 24 hours a day. And she says, kind of rightly, that it would have taken some time to figure out how to make things work, and he didn't even give it a year. I think she's right, actually. He just up and quit the marriage when things got difficult for all of them. But it's not like she was off doing championship show jumping or something. She was the freaking prime minister and leader of the nation. So that job will dominate the home life of the people in any prime minister's family. But of course, the suggestion is there that women still have to hold everything together, no matter what job they might have. And we did have somebody, one of our listeners, one of our beloved listeners, write into us and mention that about this issue as well. And then we also, there's been some commentary about this on other sources about Borgen, saying that, that's a fair amount of time to make a decision in a relationship. But like, we're talking about a 10-year plus marriage, obviously here, like 9 months or 10 months out of a 15 or 17 or 18-year marriage is not a lot of time. And this is a tremendous adjustment. It's not like, this is not a stay-at-home mom who got a part-time job. It's not like somebody who went from part-time to full-time work or changed fields and is working longer hours with a longer commute. This is the leader of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And there doesn't seem to be any quarter cut for Birgitte here, but I kind of think that Philip did give up too quickly.
Yeah.
He went back on their agreements, right? He's the one, he decided suddenly that when his wife started getting attention and became the leader of the nation, that he wanted to be more ambitious and take on this new job and everything as well. And that caused a bit of an absence, and he did not have to do that. He could have waited.
Yeah.
And a woman in that position would have been expected to wait.
Well, a woman in that position would not even be expected to work, stay home and take care of the kids.
Yeah, or at least not in a job that required the kind of attention that this job does. And, also politics is a machine that runs itself kind of, and each person, as in democracies where people are elected in and out of office, regardless of the leanings of the leadership or the parties in power, they still have to work within the machine, and the machine is kind of out of control. Like, you can't stop it and make it work. You can't stop the machine of politics to give yourself a work-life balance. That's just not how it works. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, in the middle of that argument, Cecile comes and picks Philip up from the house, and she also wants to talk. So things are not going well for Philip with the women right now. And she tells him she can't find her place in all of this, that they all seem like a family again. And he says, of course, he has to be there for his daughter. And he's right about that, actually. He does have to be there for his daughter. And, he has to deal with Birgitte for Laura's sake and show that they're unified together because they are her parents. That's totally correct. But also his girlfriend has a point where she's kind of like a little new in this situation, and it's always been a little bit weird. And, she's feeling the strain as well. So later on, we see Philip come by with Magnus after taking him out to a movie, and Hesselbo's interview is on TV. And he's talking about how some jobs don't allow for much of a home life, and how women try to make that happen more than men. Women try to make the home life happen more than men. He's asked if he's neglected his family. He admits that he did. Because of I believe that was like the first episode, right? His wife's shopping scandal and the payment problem. And he says it maybe even make him a bad person, but he felt he had to put the duties of the prime minister and it's implied the responsibility for the nation above family. And then Hesselbo admits that Birgitte is a good person for taking care of her child, but that's not the election issue. And he's right, it's not. So he's actually being very fair to her. The election issues have to do with the reforms the government's passing, I think, is what he's trying to say. Mm-hmm. And all of this, but all of that, Philip and Birgitte sitting there listening to it, all of it seems to cause some kind of realization with Philip. And it plays out on his face as he reaches for Brigitte's hand, but she takes it away. And he finally kind of figures out that he may have made a mistake. And really, you think?
Yeah.
And in fact, the next scene, he goes to see Cecile. He says he can't go on a trip they planned, and it becomes clear they're splitting up. He realizes he can't carry on with a relationship with her. And it's pretty sad, actually. Maybe Philip is the one who needs therapy. He should go talk to Laura anyway. He can't decide what he wants. He should have waited to figure out a way to make things work with Birgitte. And it's pretty dumb to come to that realization by watching Hesselbo on TV. He seems to have some regrets, and Cecile rightly points out that he started something with her before finishing what he left behind. And I think that's fair too. And I also think, maybe he was also feeling very lost and alone, and people act desperately when they feel lost and alone. So maybe he was having some mental health crisis as well. It's never talked about, but like, if you think about, people are now believing that, like, a lot of mental health issues are kind of hereditary. I'm not just pointing, just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he should have waited. But anyway, he comes, so later on, when we see Philip and Birgitte again, he comes to take Magnus somewhere, and he tells her that he broke it off with Cecile, but he will wait to tell the kids because he's not sure how he feels. So actually, even though he's not a good partner during this crisis with him and Birgitte, he's an excellent father the entire way through. He never puts his children off to the side. Never, ever, never once.
Agree.
And I think that's worth pointing out, because we're kind of ripping him apart for being hasty and leaving his wife and everything. And we're kind of like, we're besmirching him a little bit, but he is faultless. Well, as much as anyone can be as a parent. He's there for Laura. He's there for Magnus. He spends time with them. He never argues with Birgitte in front of them. They never have it out in front of the kids. Like
they're always together. They're always together when they go to Lee's home. When, there's moments at the house, Philip is always there as a good dad.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important, I think, that we emphasize the good parts of his character, because even if he screwed up his relationship, that doesn't make him a terrible person entirely. And
right, correct.
As I was saying, there's no guidebook for parenting. There's no guidebook for marriages and relationships either.
Yep.
People just act how they act. And the other thing that's running through this episode, which you started talking about, is the Katrine and Kasper's relationship, which is another parallel work-life balance, private life, public life issue, right? So because there's a big question mark over, first of all, is their relationship ethical? It seems to die down in this episode, but they have other things going on. So they're looking for a new apartment together, because God knows how they fit together in that tiny apartment. Like I said before, I'm just like, Katrine's apartment in the show is like as big as my living room. Like, it's tiny. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for a new apartment. Kasper gets a bit weird when the real estate agent mentions the room that can be used as a nursery, and he insists it's an office until it tells the agent kind of rudely it's their decision how to use the rooms, and Katrine tells him to behave himself, which is kind of good. And then the second time they look at it, the realtor again asks about kids, but it's a bit over the top and kind of rude, and it's a bit weird as far as the writing goes. I think, why is everyone obsessed over like assuming this couple's going to have kids, especially when the first time you see them, the guy's like, it's an office, and he talks about taking down a wall and all this, and she should just, like, the real estate lady should have figured it out. But anyway, the other thing Katrine needs to do is talk about Torben and whether or not her temporary job, because she's actually filling in for someone on maternity leave, even though Torben's been asking her what her plans are that way. But they need to talk about if her current temporary position will continue or whatever. And that gets put off when Kasper shows up with a big bunch of roses to make Katrine feel better about the real estate kerfuffle. And everyone gawps at them, and they've been trying to avoid being seen together because everyone will gawp at them. And then that happens, and it's kind of funny, actually.
Yeah.
They continue to argue back and forth about whether or not to have kids. This is a hot button issue for Kasper. Katrine brings it up again, and because it's obviously something that's on her mind. And she says to him, you have the right not to want children, and I have the right to want them. And he agrees, and she says, it's not okay, we can't talk about it. And he says, we have. And then she points out that they have not actually talked about it. It's been shut down by him. They've never actually properly discussed it. She says she's 31. He should understand that she's 31 and wants to have kids eventually. And he says he doesn't want to pass his crummy DNA on to anyone. And when she asks why, he says, how can you ask that? And she says, we can't live in the shadow of your past. He gets angry and yells that he doesn't want, he yells, like he bangs the table and yells. There's yelling. And when she says he's an example of how kids can survive the worst, she says, he's an example of how kids can survive the worst kinds of experiences. And has he, though? And that kind of, you can see Katrine starting to question the whole relationship. So Kasper goes to see his mother, maybe to try and get some answers. But she has dementia. So he goes to see his dementia-afflicted mother. She calls him by his real name, Kenneth, which is fine. He obviously resents her for her lack of action for what went on when he was with his father, as we know, and the abuse that happened. And he asks her why she let it happen, but she cannot or won't answer. He tells her that he met someone who wants to have his baby. She's not at all in the presence. She starts singing songs from his childhood. And it's really kind of tragic, actually. I mean, I'm not currently dealing with anyone in my family who has dementia, but it's pretty tragic when it happens. Although I will say, just a little shout out to the Canadian public healthcare system. Thank you for fixing my dad. So I have had parents who have dealt with pretty major health crises. My dad went through heart surgery in the public system in Canada and is doing really well. Thank you very much for that. Anyway, he will never get his answers, actually. And he really doesn't have anyone except Katrina. He won't get his answers about what happened to him, but really, does anyone? Do we ever really find out why things happen to us? Not really. We just have to deal with the what of happened to us. So he comes back to Katrine and seems much more able to talk about it. And he actually removes her birth control pills off to the side. So much for Torben's opinions. He tells her he loves her, Kasper, that is. Kasper tells Katrine he loves her, not Torben, just to make that clear. Torben's not declaring his love for Katrine. This scene allows this discussion between Katrine and Torben to happen. He gives her this weird backhanded compliments of saying they've never worked so well together, that he would miss the endless frustrations of working with her and her being a pain in the ass to him all the time. He makes her promise to stay true to herself and wants her as a regular host. So he obviously has this is the interesting thing about Torben. He's kind of treats everyone badly, but he always sees their value, even though he always puts them down. Mm-hmm. He's the original nigger. So he also brings up pregnancy again and tells her it would be better for him if she doesn't have a baby soon, because that will cause problems with scheduling. And I have written down here many exclamation points in brackets. And this is so ridiculous. It should never happen in a workplace, but I guess it does. So I just was like, yeah, like what you said before, that's kind of ridiculous. So as we come to the conclusion of the episode, we see Bent comes a couple times. First, he comes and sees Birgitte while she's at home fixing her bicycle. I had that.
That was hot, by the way. Birgitte outside, and her hair's down. She's more relaxed. She's on her break from being, having PM duties, and she's got the bicycle all fixing it up. I thought that was hot.
Yeah. And he comes by, and that's earlier in the episode, actually. And I had it written down, and I seem to have deleted that by accident. But it was a very nice scene, and he comes and tells her the garden looks great and she looks great, and the rest has been good for her, but not to neglect the castle Borgen too long, because she's got to go back and assert herself, kind of exactly paralleling what Kasper was saying. So when she's back, he comes to the office. He's kind of semi-retired because of his health crisis. And he brings her flowers, his hydrangeas, and tells her how to take care of them. And I love Ben so much. He's one of my favorite characters on this whole show.
I get so happy when I see him.
Yeah, me too. It's oh, Ben's on. Oh. And then the reform package goes through. He expresses the disappointment with the gender discussion and not her accomplishments. He's I don't know why they're talking about why you're a woman when they should be talking about the things you've actually done. And he shows her notes from their first meetings, and that state this: the first thing they want to accomplish when she becomes prime minister: rethink the Danish welfare model, secure the environment through long-term planning, and strengthen the healthcare system and make it independent from private insurance. And he says, then, no one ever praises the prime minister, so I'm going to do it. You've done a hell of a good job. Hard times will come with, I suppose, proposed tax cuts that are coming up, but Birgitte will take it, and she plans to go to see the Queen. So something's up. If you go to see the Queen, something's up. Mm-hmm. And all three of those things she accomplishes. She has some losses in season 2, certain bits of legislation don't pass, but those general things start to take shape under her leadership in season 2. And then we see the Speaker of the House announce the Prime Minister has an extraordinary remark as a callback to earlier what Bent told Birgitte at the beginning of the episode, that only one other Prime Minister used that phrase and he resigned. It causes a stir in the House. Birgitte lists the first 4 women who gained seats in Danish Parliament in 1918. Elna Munch, Helga Larsen, and Karen Ankersted, and Matilda Malling Hauschultz, and Hauschultz, sorry, my bad German pronunciation there, and says, and thus, she says, and thus ended the debate about whether women are cut out to be politicians. To all those who wish to debate whether women should enter politics on equal terms with men and ultimately become prime minister, I can only say you are 100 years behind. She states that anyone who thought she would resign and become a housewife did not really know her at all. Not that there's anything wrong with being a stay-at-home mom either. That's a perfectly legitimate choice and a freaking hard job, frankly. And she calls an election at this point, asking the people to choose the prime minister that they see as the best person to serve the country and not be concerned with the gender of that person. And that's how the episode and the season wraps up. And I'm so happy that they addressed all those double standards. I thought that was great. And also, I'm quite a fan of the Danish Queen at the moment, because after the death of Queen Elizabeth II in England, she made some pretty big reforms to the titles of her children and reduced their royal duties to try and normalize things a bit more, which I thought was really interesting. An interesting move after seeing all the pomp and circumstance of what's going on with the English royal family.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's an aside. So yeah, that's how season 2 ends. So there's a lot of focus in this season on public versus private life and the accomplishments that Birgitte was able to do. There's a lot of like pluses and minuses. Minus on the home side, a plus on the home side. The minus is the divorce, the plus is helping Laura, and minuses with some legislation like the issue in Afghanistan. That was a tough call for her, and a few other things that don't happen. And then pluses like the Karun negotiation, like passing this reform bill. Yeah, and that's all I have to say about episode 10.
So breaking it into discussion then, I'll start and I'll say I absolutely agree with Cecile when she said to him, basically she said to him, you ran into this relationship with me without settling your previous relationship. And I agree with her 100% that he didn't leave time. He went from his wife straight to her without letting it digest and settle what happened and for him to reflect on what happened. And you said something right that we never talked about before, which is Philip should seek the advice of some therapist to discuss what's going on with him. We don't see Philip with close friends, right? The way in our personal lives, if something, is a bit haywire or we're upset, we'll reach out to one of our close friends, close trusted friends, and talk about it. When Philip's marriage comes to a crumble and he decides to leave, he doesn't discuss that with anyone.
No, he doesn't.
Right. And I know, like in my real life, these are the things friends would discuss. Hey, this person is really changing and I don't know what to do, or this is, something we're talking about in my household. And, what do you think about that? Like, we don't see Philip talk to anyone about it. So he should have taken a break and not jumped into Cecile. And for the record, I like Cecile. I have no issue with her. I think she's very attentive and she's very sensitive to what's going on. And he was right when he told her Laura is his priority, and she was not debating that. She's not competing with Laura.
Absolutely, she's not.
Right. But it's good that he asserted that. But I also think that he rushed, and that was a big mistake.
I also thought, he does obviously show some grief and anxiety about Laura's situation because he actually cries on Cecile's shoulder.
Yes.
In episode 9.
In my episode.
And Yeah, and I didn't make a note of that. I was like kind of impressed by that. So it's obvious that he's suffering, and maybe not just because of Laura, maybe because of like the way things are going with his relationship with Birgitte as well. He's got a lot of issues that are not being resolved.
Yeah. It's a complex situation he's in, for sure.
Yeah. And I know some people might say to us, like, we're too critical of Philip, or like we're just painting with a very broad feminist brush or whatever. But also, like I said, like, if you want to keep first of all, it's a TV show. Second of all, if you want to keep it realistic, people don't always make the best decisions. Birgitte didn't make the best decisions maybe for her family either, in some of the things that she could have done differently. But Philip didn't make the best decisions as well. And so it's impossible for everyone to make the best decisions all the time about anything that they do.
That's right.
So I thought, like, problems are realistic. Problems happen.
Yep. And we'll go into that. So after this episode here, we're going to record a season 2 recap episode.
Yeah.
And Amy and I are going to talk about what we thought overall of season 2. And we will go in more about Philip there. But is there anything else in this episode that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I just certainly, as far as like people making mistakes, like I said, like we can't know what a mistake is while we're doing it. Sometimes you have to wait until the aftermath of that. There's no roadmap to anything. So we can, and as real life people, we can't go back and look at the previous episodes of our life and go, oh, the writers screwed that up. Like, that's not a very realistic portrayal. We can't do that. So,
no, and neither can they.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
that's what's realistic, that there is no right choice. How do you know what's right? No one knows what's right until you've lived it, and then reflect and you learn lessons from it and try to make better decisions in the future. But one thing I will say, and I will comment on this on the season 2 recap briefly, hopefully the listeners will join us for that, is that I really like the parallel between Philip and Birgitte versus Kasper and Katrine, and that, as you just talked about and pointed out, these life circumstances which are beyond our control, and they're it's no one's fault. It's not a fault of Katrine for wanting to have a baby. It's not a fault of Birgitte for wanting to work hard and excel at being a prime minister. It's not a fault of Philip that he wants to have a partner who's going to give him a bit more time. And with Kasper, it's not his fault either that he doesn't want to have a baby. And that he's got residual, memories of what happened in his past. It's no one's fault. And as I said in one of the bonus episodes, I believe in season 1, is that we all go into things innocently where we think, oh, my partner is moving to a new city and we're going to move together for a new job and it's going to be so great. Or, my son is going to university, he's moving away, life is going to be great and I'm going to be okay. And like, all these are hypothetical examples I'm making up, but the point is, you don't know, right? Or I'm going to move away with this person I've been dating for a year and we're going to go to a foreign country and everything is going to be perfect. And no, it might not be, but we never know. But the point in life is that we have to take chances.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So that's all I'll say there. I will say, in my opinion, I think episode 9 was more dramatic, and there was more happening in episode 9. And actually, the first time I watched episode 9 ever, I thought that would be the season finale.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
Because it was just so dramatic. Like, she hands over the duties to Thornton to take over for her while she's away. And it was shocking, right? Because, and in typical Morgan style, it happened so quickly. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
He made the decision. The next scene, we're at the press conference, Thornton's there. She said it out loud. Again, the show doesn't waste time. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
and once again, for our listeners, if we screwed up somebody's name, we are not native Danish speakers. In fact, sometimes I feel like I barely speak English. So you'll just have to give us a bit of a break on pronunciation. I'm sorry.
We are
From
sorry.
From time to time, we will slip up. Yeah.
All right. So is there anything else you want to get into before
Nope, that's
we
it. I think we can wrap this episode up.
All right, and we'll move on to recording our season 2 recap next. So listeners, I hope you'll stick around for that. We'd like to thank our listeners for joining us on this episode. You can check us out on our website, theborgenpodcast.com, where all of our episodes are archived and you can learn more about the show and more about us. Also, please subscribe to the podcast so you know when new episodes come out. We'd like to thank our good friend Garth Jensen, whose birthday was yesterday, and I'm going to his birthday party tonight. We'd like to thank you, Garth, for providing our intro and outro music. Thank you very much.
And happy birthday.
And lastly, don't forget to check us out on all social media platforms. We are there and we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to connect with us and share what's on your mind by using the hashtag #TheBorgenPodcast or by sending us an email or voice memo to theborgenpodcast@gmail.com.